In the weeks that followed, the wedding plans picked up. Venue booked. Dress chosen. Guest list finalized. Daniel seemed distant, but I blamed the stress. Ethan was busier too, said work was crazy, said he was tired. He missed 2 cake tastings. My mom thought it was strange, but I told her, he's just not the wedding type. I told myself that too. 2 weeks before the wedding, I caught Daniel crying in the bathroom. He said it was just nerves, said he was overwhelmed, said he loved me more than anything and couldn't wait to marry me. And I believed him. I believed him because the alternative was unthinkable. I didn't know then that the people I trusted most were already planning their own wedding. I remember the last night clearly. The night before, everything collapsed. We were having a joint family dinner. Everyone was laughing, passing dishes, and swapping childhood stories. Daniel was sitting across from me, and Ethan was to his left. And there was a moment, a pause. Daniel glanced at Ethan. Ethan smiled. And in that second, I saw everything I had refused to see for months. Love, longing, guilt. It hit me like a slow, spreading stain. That night, I didn't sleep. I scrolled through old messages, photos, voice notes, connecting dots I had ignored, reading between lines I had written myself. And by sunrise, I knew, but I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't call off the wedding. No, I waited. Because betrayal deserves something more than anger. It deserves a stage. I could have ended everything with one sentence, one screenshot, one accusation, one scream in the middle of a quiet room. But I didn't, because betrayal like this deserved to breathe. It deserved to rot in the open, to unravel slowly, to choke on its own shame. So I smiled. I played the part, and I let them believe they'd gotten away with it. Daniel kept acting like the perfect fiancé. He kissed my forehead when I was stressed. He stayed late helping me fold wedding programs. He even helped my dad install fairy lights around the altar. Meanwhile, Ethan, he was quieter now, still helpful, still supportive. But he avoided eye contact more often. And when I hugged him, he froze, like my arms had become a question he didn't want to answer. I had to choke back bile just to stay composed. The week before the wedding, I accidentally left my phone unlocked on the coffee table with the photo app wide open to the blurry 8-second video. I went into the kitchen to grab water. When I came back, Daniel's face was pale. "Where'd you get this?" he asked quietly. I shrugged. "No idea. Probably some weird auto-recording." "Funny, huh?" He forced a laugh. I let him believe that was the end of it. Every night, I added more pieces to the puzzle. Hotel receipts in Ethan's email. A shared playlist titled, "For Us," hidden on Spotify. A private Venmo transaction from Daniel to Ethan labeled, "Forever Fleta." They weren't just cheating. In the weeks that followed, the wedding plans picked up. Venue booked. Dress chosen. Guest list finalized. Daniel seemed distant, but I blamed the stress. Ethan was busier too, said work was crazy, said he was tired. He missed 2 cake tastings. My mom thought it was strange, but I told her, he's just not the wedding type. I told myself that too. 2 weeks before the wedding, I caught Daniel crying in the bathroom. He said it was just nerves, said he was overwhelmed, said he loved me more than anything and couldn't wait to marry me. And I believed him. I believed him because the alternative was unthinkable. I didn't know then that the people I trusted most were already planning their own wedding. I remember the last night clearly. The night before, everything collapsed. We were having a joint family dinner. Everyone was laughing, passing dishes, and swapping childhood stories. Daniel was sitting across from me, and Ethan was to his left. And there was a moment, a pause. Daniel glanced at Ethan. Ethan smiled. And in that second, I saw everything I had refused to see for months. Love, longing, guilt. It hit me like a slow, spreading stain. That night, I didn't sleep. I scrolled through old messages, photos, voice notes, connecting dots I had ignored, reading between lines I had written myself. And by sunrise, I knew, but I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't call off the wedding. No, I waited. Because betrayal deserves something more than anger. It deserves a stage. I could have ended everything with one sentence, one screenshot, one accusation, one scream in the middle of a quiet room. But I didn't, because betrayal like this deserved to breathe. It deserved to rot in the open, to unravel slowly, to choke on its own shame. So I smiled. I played the part, and I let them believe they'd gotten away with it. Daniel kept acting like the perfect fiancé. He kissed my forehead when I was stressed. He stayed late helping me fold wedding programs. He even helped my dad install fairy lights around the altar. Meanwhile, Ethan, he was quieter now, still helpful, still supportive. But he avoided eye contact more often. And when I hugged him, he froze, like my arms had become a question he didn't want to answer. I had to choke back bile just to stay composed. The week before the wedding, I accidentally left my phone unlocked on the coffee table with the photo app wide open to the blurry 8-second video. I went into the kitchen to grab water. When I came back, Daniel's face was pale. "Where'd you get this?" he asked quietly. I shrugged. "No idea. Probably some weird auto-recording." "Funny, huh?" He forced a laugh. I let him believe that was the end of it. Every night, I added more pieces to the puzzle. Hotel receipts in Ethan's email. A shared playlist titled For Us, hidden on Spotify. A private Venmo transaction from Daniel to Ethan labeled Forever Flata. They weren't just cheating. I could have ended everything with one sentence, one screenshot, one accusation, one scream in the middle of a quiet room. But I didn't. Because betrayal like this deserved to breathe. It deserved to rot in the open, to unravel slowly, to choke on its own shame. So I smiled. I played the part, and I let them believe they'd gotten away with it. Daniel kept acting like the perfect fiancé. He kissed my forehead when I was stressed. He stayed late helping me fold wedding programs. He even helped my dad install fairy lights around the altar. Meanwhile, Ethan? He was quieter now, still helpful, still supportive, but he avoided eye contact more often. And when I hugged him, he froze, like my arms had become a question he didn't want to answer. I had to choke back bile just to stay composed. The week before the wedding, I accidentally left my phone unlocked on the coffee table, with the photo app wide open to the blurry 8-second video. I went into the kitchen to grab water. When I came back, Daniel's face was pale. "Where'd you get this?" he asked quietly. I shrugged. "No idea. Probably some weird auto-recording." "Funny, huh?" He forced a laugh. I let him believe that was the end of it. Every night, I added more pieces to the puzzle. Hotel receipts in Ethan's email. A shared playlist titled For Us, hidden on Spotify. A private Venmo transaction from Daniel to Ethan labeled Forever Flater. They weren't just cheating. They were planning a life together, behind my back, in my shadow, with my future. But I didn't cry anymore. I planned. Every bouquet, every candle, every table arrangement, all laid out like pieces in a performance. Not a wedding, but a reveal. 2 nights before the ceremony, I walked into Daniel's apartment, unannounced. He looked surprised, but not suspicious. He was folding socks. Still, the spreadsheet guy. I handed him a mug of hot cocoa and said, "I'm nervous." He smiled softly. "So am I, but in a good way." "You're sure about this?" I asked. He nodded without blinking. "Absolutely." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed me, and I let him, because that would be the last time. The morning of the wedding was bright and unbearably warm. Birds chirped outside my window like they didn't know they were mocking me. My makeup artist said I had glowing bride energy. My mother said I looked like a dream, and I did, because vengeance looks flawless in white. Daniel stood at the altar like a man in a fairy tale. My brother stood beside him, as his best man. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I walked down the aisle, veil draped low, I looked into both of their eyes and smiled. My father whispered, "You okay?" I said, "Never better." The ceremony went on in slow motion. Vows, rings, laughter from the crowd. The officiant asked the question, "Do you, Ava Sinclair, take Daniel Carter to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I opened my mouth, then paused, and the silence stretched. Long enough for Daniel to look concerned, long enough for my mother to shift in her seat, long enough for Ethan to look at me, really look at me. And in that stillness, I finally spoke. "Actually," I said calmly, "before I say I do, I have a little surprise." Daniel blinked. The officiant looked confused. I turned to the crowd. "We're all here today because we believe in love. But sometimes, love is stolen. Sometimes, it's shared in secret. And sometimes, it's caught on camera." I stepped aside and pointed toward the projector screen. My maid of honor, who had known everything, pressed play, and the video began. First came the photo montage, the happy pictures of Daniel and me. Our first date, Christmas together, a beach vacation. Then faint at first screenshots began to overlay. Text messages, hidden photos, emails between Ethan and Daniel. "Can't wait to wake up next to you every day." She has no idea. "After the wedding, we'll figure everything out." Then the blurry video, Daniel brushing Ethan's hand. The moment I knew, the church was silent. Gasps, muffled swearing. My aunt covered her mouth. My father stood up in shock. And Daniel, he didn't move. He just stared at the screen face, white, lips parted like he was seeing his own funeral. Ethan dropped his gaze to the floor. My mother whispered, "Ava, what is this?" "The truth," I said, and then I walked. Down the aisle, out of the church, into the light. I didn't wait for anyone to follow, because I didn't need a groom, and I sure as hell didn't need a brother. What I needed was peace, and it had finally arrived. The wedding was over before it ever began. I didn't stay to see how Daniel explained himself. I didn't stick around to watch Ethan lie through his teeth. I just walked out the chapel doors and let the truth do what it does best: burn. By the time I got to my car, my phone was already vibrating like it had caught fire. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails from everyone. Daniel, my mom, Ethan, even my boss. Because when betrayal happens this big, it doesn't stay inside family walls. It spills into the streets, into group chats, into social media, and I had just lit the match in front of over 100 people. I didn't answer anyone that day. I checked into a hotel under a different name, turned off notifications, ordered French fries and champagne, and watched the internet explode. Someone had uploaded a clip of the wedding chaos within hours, me voice echoing through stained glass. Sometimes, love is stolen. In 24 hours, it had 30 views. By morning, it was on TikTok. The fallout started with my parents. My mom called me 3 times in a row, sobbing into the voicemail. "Sweetheart, please come home. We didn't know. We would have told you if we suspected. Please." I never thought healing would feel like vengeance. But there I was, burning my old journals in the hotel sink, watching the girl I used to be go up and smoke. It wasn't symbolic. It was survival. The Ava who begged for love? Gone. The Ava who second-guessed her instincts? Buried. What rose from the ashes wasn't bitter. She was dangerous, because she finally knew her worth, and she didn't need anyone to validate it. I cut my hair the next morning. Not in a cliché, breakup chop way. In a rebirth way. Short, sharp, clean. I changed my phone number, deleted old photos, canceled the apartment lease I shared with Daniel. I left no trace, and then I disappeared. But not in silence. The blog, Sleeping with the Best Man, kept growing. People thought it was fiction. A brilliant, bitter story, written by some anonymous genius. They didn't know it was real, that it was mine, that every post was carved out of my ribs, and that I was still writing it while sipping coffee in a cabin 200 miles from the wreckage of my old life. Strangers began messaging the blog's inbox. Survivors of betrayal, people stuck in silence, women who felt invisible, until they read my words. And somewhere between post 14 and post 17, I realized something. This wasn't just a personal story anymore. It was a movement. So I gave it a face. But not my face. Not yet. I created a second identity, Elena Vale, a composite of the strongest women I knew. I launched a podcast, a newsletter, an anonymous TikTok that shared quotes from the blog, overlaid on moody music and vintage video clips. Within a month, I had 0 followers. By month 2, a literary agent reached out. Is this memoir fiction? Or are you Elena? I ignored the message. Because the truth wasn't the point. The impact was. While Daniel and Ethan ducked from whispers, I became the whisper. Every time someone said, "Did you read that blog?" Every time someone tagged, "Sleeping with the best man" under a meme or a tearful selfie, it was like leaving tiny pieces of me in the world. And Daniel? He couldn't escape it. He texted me again one night. A new number. No greeting. Just, "You've made your point. Please stop." I laughed. I didn't respond. Instead, I posted another blog entry. Funny how men ruin lives and still expect you to worry about theirs. It got 0 likes in 36 hours. And Ethan? He finally reached out too. His message was longer, more emotional, a mix of guilt and defensiveness. I never meant to fall in love with him. I never meant to hurt you. But intentions don't erase betrayal. So I said nothing. Because now, silence was my loudest weapon. While their reputations crumbled, mine flourished. People began sharing their own stories under the hashtag #BestManEffect. It wasn't about cheating anymore. It was about betrayal from people closest to you and the brutal, beautiful rise that followed. It was about taking back your narrative. It was about becoming the main character again. One morning, I woke up to an email from a production company. Netflix level, real money. They wanted to option the blog as a limited series. Think Gone Girl, but real, the producer wrote. Your voice is electric. They didn't know who I really was, and I liked it that way. Because Elena Vale had become more powerful than Ava Sinclair ever could have imagined. Still, I wasn't done. There was one final act to this story. One more card I hadn't played. Because, yes, they thought they lost me. But they didn't know I was about to walk back into their lives one last time. Not as the heartbroken girl, but as the woman who owned the story. It had been 8 months since the wedding. 8 months since I stood in front of 100 people and burned 2 men with the truth. 8 months since I became someone else. In public, I was Elena Vale, author, podcast host, the anonymous storm behind Sleeping with the Best Man. But in private, I was still Ava, the girl who had to remind herself every day that she wasn't crazy, that the betrayal she experienced was real. That walking away was not weakness, it was power. The city I moved to was smaller than the one I left. Quieter, the kind of place where people sipped chai in independent bookstores and held eye contact longer than they should. I liked that. I liked disappearing into soft places after surviving a hard truth. But fate has a sick sense of humor. Because fate, apparently, shops at indie bookstores too. It happened on a rainy Thursday. I was wearing an oversized hoodie, and my hair was pulled into a lazy bun. I had no makeup on, no armor, and there he was. Not Daniel, not Ethan, but Grace, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. The one he dumped a year before my wedding. The one who vanished quietly. No drama, no revenge, just disappeared from our lives. And now she was standing 10 feet away from me, flipping through the same memoir table I was browsing. She looked older. Not in a bad way, just seasoned. Like someone who had lived through something heavy and come out smarter. And she didn't recognize me, which was perfect. I watched her fingers land on a book, Sleeping with the Best Man, the untold truth behind the viral blog. The cover was sleek, minimal, anonymous. She tilted her head. I saw her eyes widen in surprise. Wait, what? She picked up the book and turned it over, scanning the back like she didn't believe what she was seeing. Then softly she whispered, "Oh my God, Ethan. I stepped beside her casually. You know him? She looked startled, then laughed nervously. Sort of. We dated once. The author used to be his sister. She still didn't recognize me, so I kept going. Yeah? Did he do the things in the book? She paused, her mouth opened, then closed. Then she nodded slowly. He did worse. And just like that, the floodgates opened. We sat at the bookstore cafe for 2 hours. She spilled everything Ethan had done to her with emotional gaslighting, the cheating, the manipulation. I listened, nodding, sipping my chai while hiding my grin behind the steam, because hearing her side validated everything I had lived through. But more than that, it gave me a new idea. Grace was smart and angry. Not the screaming kind, the strategic kind. The kind of woman who didn't want revenge for herself, but would absolutely help someone orchestrate it for someone else. By the time we said goodbye, I had her number, her trust, and a seed of a final plan forming in my head. That night, I opened a private document on my laptop. Title, Phase 3, The Public Unmasking. Because here's the thing about toxic men. They fear truth, but they fear public recognition of truth even more. And I wasn't anonymous anymore. The book deal had changed everything. My podcast was on Spotify's trending list. My blog was being studied in college gender studies classes. So now, it was time to walk out of the shadows and face them both. But I wouldn't just show up unannounced. I would do it with stage lights, with applause, with a platform. Because nothing hurts narcissists more than realizing the person they tried to break became famous for telling the world how they did it. The mic was warm beneath my fingers. It always was like it remembered every whispered confession, every story cried out into the dark, every anonymous soul who had written to me with trembling fingers and broken hearts. But today wasn't about them. Today was about me. For the first time since my life shattered on a wedding altar, I was going to say their names. Daniel Carter, Ethan Sinclair, my ex-fiancé, my brother. I had over 500 podcast subscribers now. Most had followed me since I started the series anonymously. They didn't know who I was. They just knew the blog, the heartbreak, the fire. They knew Elena Vale, but not Ava Sinclair. Not yet. Mic check. 1, 2. Ready when you are. My producer's voice crackled in my headphones. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and began. Podcast episode title, The Truth, Unfiltered. Opening lines. This is not fiction. This is not a dramatization. This is not some anonymous woman in the shadows anymore. My name is Ava Sinclair, and this is what really happened. I told the story from the beginning, the proposal, the video, the long weeks of smiling through a crumbling world, the wedding that was never a wedding, the fallout that went viral, the blog that became my voice. I held nothing back. No aliases, no censorship. Just truth raw, razor-edged, and final. Daniel Carter proposed to me while he was sleeping with my brother. Ethan Sinclair, me, own blood, watched me plan a wedding for a future they had already stolen, and I smiled through every lie, because I was collecting proof. I included clips, audio from their conversations I had recorded by accident and intentionally. Screenshots, emails. I even read a letter Ethan once wrote to Daniel titled, Someday She'll Understand. I read it aloud on air. And then, I laughed. The internet broke. Before the episode was even halfway uploaded, the buzz started. Clips were screen recorded and shared before Spotify could finish processing the stream. Ava Sinclair trended on Twitter within 2 hours. People were furious. People were in awe. People were ready to fight. Daniel tried to deny everything at first. Posted a now-deleted story saying it was deeply edited lies from a bitter woman. But the receipts? They were ironclad, too specific, too real. And then came the interviews. First from old classmates, then co-workers, then even a former partner of Ethan's who shared eerily similar patterns of manipulation. My story gave them the courage to come forward. The podcast wasn't just an episode now. It was a reckoning. And Daniel and Ethan were at the center of the storm. By the end of the week, Daniel was dropped by 2 real estate clients. Ethan was fired from his PR firm. A change.org Petition called to blacklist them from several online spaces. And me? I was offered a TED Talk, a book tour, a Netflix docuseries deal, and most importantly, peace. Not because I ruined them, but because I finally told the truth. They tried to write my story for me, I said in the final lines of the podcast, but they forgot I was always the narrator. I ended the episode in silence. No outro music, no sponsor, just a quiet fade. Because some moments don't need applause, they just need to be heard. They say silence is the loudest revenge, but sometimes words leave a deeper scar, especially when they come from the one you thought would never speak again. I hadn't seen either of them since the wedding day. No texts, no emails, no apologies that ever meant anything. But after the podcast dropped, after the world heard my voice and my name, after their reputations went into free fall, I decided it was time. Not to scream, not to curse, just to deliver one final message, one that would stay with them forever. I handwrote the letters. No email, no digital trail. Ink on paper deliberate, slow, unerasable. Letter to Daniel Carter. Daniel, I hope this letter finds you the way you left me. Confused, broken, alone. But unlike you, I didn't lie to the person I loved. I didn't destroy someone's future while pretending to build it. I didn't sleep with their family behind their back and expect forgiveness in the end. I want you to know, I did love you. Real love. The kind you don't get twice in a lifetime. And you didn't just throw it away, you buried it with every message, every lie, every secret glance across dinner tables. But the beautiful thing about being shattered is that you get to decide how you put yourself back together. You made me a villain in your story. I made myself the hero in mine. Don't ever contact me again. I am not angry anymore. I am free. Ava. High letter to Ethan Sinclair. Ethan, there are no words for what you did, but I'm going to try anyway. You weren't just my brother. You were my best friend, my blood, my history. You knew every boy who ever broke my heart. You threatened the ones who made me cry. And then, you became the worst of them. I watched you help me choose my dress while you slept with the man I was supposed to marry. I heard you toast to our forever while you laughed behind closed doors. But here's what you didn't expect. That I would survive, that I would thrive, that I would become a voice that made millions listen. You and Daniel taught me how to rebuild from betrayal. And for that, I thank you. You don't deserve me. You never did. Goodbye. Ava. I didn't mail the letters right away. I had them delivered by hand through a courier service that required a signature. I wanted to be sure they both held those pages in their hands, felt the weight of every sentence, saw my name at the bottom. For once, they couldn't delete me. The responses were predictable. Daniel sent a one-word reply. Sorry. I blocked the number. Ethan didn't respond at all. And that was fine, because it wasn't about closure. It was about completion. The last chapter written, signed, sealed, done. A week later, I took a walk around my new city. No one recognized me. Ava Sinclair was still only a name behind a movement. Elena Vale still wore the mask. And I liked it that way. Because I had nothing to prove, nothing to hide, and no one left to fear. But I knew somewhere, both of them were reading my words over and over, wondering how they lost everything, wondering how the girl they underestimated had become the woman who wrote their ending. The letters closed my chapter, but they opened the world's, because I wasn't the only one who had been lied to. I wasn't the only woman who had watched her life collapse, because two people she trusted played God with her heart. I wasn't the only one who stayed silent for too long. My podcast episode, The Truth, Unfiltered, didn't just go viral. It became a movement. Thousands of women began sharing their own stories online, using the hashtags, I am Ava, Best Man Betrayal, Not Your Scapegoat. Each story was raw. Each voice was shaking, but steady. They wrote about cheating boyfriends, narcissistic partners, backstabbing siblings, and fake friends who wore smiles like armor. Some stories were heartbreaking. Some were terrifying. Some were exactly like mine. And all of them needed to be heard. A major news outlet picked up the story. Then, another. Then a New York Times op-ed called it, "The Ava Sinclair Effect: How One Woman's Voice Changed the Silence Around Personal Betrayal." I didn't ask for any of it, but I embraced it, because every time someone said, "Your story gave me the courage to walk away," I felt like I had taken a brick out of the wall they were trapped behind. And then the emails came. From men, not angry ones, though there were plenty of those too, but real, emotional, raw ones. Some confessed they had cheated and never realized the full cost. Some admitted they had stayed silent while their friends hurt people. Some said they were learning. One man wrote, "Your story made me apologize to a girl I ghosted in 2017. She cried when I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just wanted you to know you made a difference." And that made me cry too. The platforms grew. My podcast reached 2 million subscribers. The book sold out in its first week. A second printing went into production immediately. And the Netflix docuseries deal? It became real. Working title: Her Last Name Was Betrayal. I didn't even pitch it. The producer who had contacted me months earlier before I ever showed my face called again. "We want you to tell it your way. Not watered down, not made palatable. Truth. Sharp as ever." They wanted me to narrate it, to appear in it, to own my story in the boldest way possible. At first, I hesitated, because cameras didn't feel safe. But then I remembered, I had nothing left to fear. The first episode trailer dropped within a month. It opened with a slow zoom in on a wedding altar. My voice in the background. I was supposed to say, "I do," but what I said instead changed everything. The screen cut to black, and the world held its breath. The response? Explosive. Petitions started for platforms to moderate cheating-based influencers. Groups launched mental health funds for people experiencing relationship trauma. Support groups formed in over a dozen cities. Women were no longer just whispering about betrayal. They were shouting, and the world was finally listening. As for Daniel and Ethan, they vanished offline completely. Rumors said Daniel moved to another state. Ethan tried to start a marketing firm but couldn't find clients. People knew their names, and not for the reasons they wanted. I didn't track them. I didn't care, because revenge wasn't the fire that fueled me anymore. It was the freedom. The power of knowing I used their betrayal to build a legacy. 9 months. That's how long it had been since the wedding that wasn't. 9 months since I walked out of the chapel in silence and let the truth destroy what needed to die. Now, I was going back, not to forgive, not to reconnect, but to remember, and to finally close the circle that started everything. I returned to my hometown on a cool autumn afternoon. The air was crisp. The sky was a faded blue, the kind of blue that feels honest. My old neighborhood looked the same. Same cracked sidewalks. Same smell of pine trees and forgotten dreams. But I wasn't the same. I had changed in ways no one could see but everyone could feel. My parents greeted me at the door like they were still holding their breath. Mom hugged me like I was made of glass. Dad hugged me like he knew I wasn't anymore. Neither mentioned Daniel. Neither mentioned Ethan. They didn't need to. Some wounds don't need words. Just quiet spaces to finally exhale in. We sat in the kitchen, me, Mom, and Dad drinking coffee. Like nothing had happened. Like everything had happened. The silence wasn't awkward. It was earned. They had watched from afar as my life unfolded across headlines and hashtags. They had seen the book, heard the podcast, held my hand through a screen while the world held up my story like a battle cry. But now, they were just my parents again. And I was just their daughter. Not Ava the betrayed, not Elena the icon, just me. Later that evening, I walked past my old bedroom and paused. The door was still cracked, just the way I used to leave it, as if I might come back needing a reason to stay. Inside, everything was still untouched, frozen in time. A photo of me and Ethan sat on the desk. High school graduation. His arm around my shoulders. My smile wide and trusting. I stared at it for a long time, then turned it face down. The next morning, I walked into town, past the church, past the flower shop I bought wedding bouquets from, past the bakery where Daniel once ordered a custom cake with "Forever" written in white icing. all of it still standing, but none of it had power anymore, because I wasn't grieving anymore. I was grateful. Grateful for the storm that revealed everyone who didn't know how to swim beside me. Grateful for the fire that taught me how to rise. Outside the bookstore, the same one where I first met Grace, I saw a chalkboard sign. New book signing event, Ava Sinclair, Sunday at 4 p.m. I hadn't asked them to put it up. They had done it on their own. I smiled. Because this town, this place that once held my heartbreak, now held my voice. Sunday came. The bookstore was full. Some faces I recognized, some I didn't. People came with books tucked under their arms and eyes filled with stories. They weren't here to gossip. They were here to heal. And I was ready to stand beside them, not as someone above, not as someone broken, but as someone who made it through. When the event ended, a teenage girl approached me, shy, shaking a little. She handed me her book to sign and said softly, "My sister said your podcast saved her. She walked out of an abusive engagement. She says you gave her permission to be brave." I swallowed hard, then signed her book. "To the brave ones, your voice matters. Never doubt it." She hugged me. And in that moment, everything was worth it. That night, I stood by my old window, looked out at the town I once thought would bury me. Instead, it became the place I rose from, and the silence that used to haunt me now felt like peace, like closure, like full circle. I used to think revenge was the end of a story, that once the truth exploded and the liars were exposed, the curtain would fall and peace would come. But real healing, real closure, it doesn't come from watching someone else lose. It comes from watching yourself win, quietly, gently, powerfully. A month after returning home, I stood in a city I never thought I'd see again, New York. Not for a confrontation, not for Daniel, not for Ethan, but for me. For a book signing, a speaking engagement, an award. I stepped into the auditorium and saw 1,000 chairs filled. Not with strangers, but with women, men, teens, survivors. People who weren't just fans. They were witnesses to what happens when one voice refuses to stay small. I didn't write my story for fame. I wrote it for freedom. And they had found theirs inside my fire. The lights dimmed. I stepped onto the stage. A standing ovation met me. I paused just for a second because I saw them in the front row. Not Daniel, not Ethan, but my parents. And Grace, to know a friend, no longer afraid to live loud. And beside her, a man with soft brown eyes and the kind of stillness that says, "I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to grow beside you." He wasn't part of the betrayal. He came after the ashes, and I let him stay. My speech began like this. There was a time I let other people write my story. I let them choose my chapters, define my worth, even steal my voice. But I'm here to tell you, you can always take the pen back, even if your hands are shaking, especially if your hands are shaking. Later, at the after party, I watched as people passed around copies of Sleeping with the Best Man. But now, it had a new title. She wrote her own ending, because revenge was only the first half. The real story was how I took that broken altar and built a stage. How I took their betrayal and wrote it into a book that saved thousands. How I stopped surviving them and started living for me. Daniel and Ethan never recovered publicly, but I didn't follow their stories anymore. Not out of spite, out of peace. They were a footnote now, and I was the whole damn book. I bought a small house in a quiet place, with a garden, with sunlight in the mornings and enough space for stillness. I kept writing, not about pain, but about rebirth. I started a foundation that supported emotional abuse survivors, hosted retreats, created scholarships, used the money from the book, the series, the podcasts, to build something bigger than me. One night, a girl emailed me. Her message was simple. "You told the truth, so now I can too." I replied, "Your truth is your power. Write it without apology." Because that's what I learned. That's what this story was always about. Not revenge, not destruction, but evolution. Final lines. They broke me, thinking I'd stay shattered. But I used the pieces to build something untouchable. I didn't just survive them. If you were hooked by Ava's revenge and inspired by her strength, like, share, subscribe to Funny Fun for more epic real-life inspired emotional stories that will move your heart and shake your soul. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching. Funny Fun Revenge Stories. See you tomorrow with another story.